Hi, I'm Steve Watson, and this is my wife, Jenny. We've been married for 37 years, and we have 4 grown children, 4 in-law children, 8 grandchildren, with 1 on the way due in March. And we also have another one that's due to adoption, hopefully in 2021. And we totally love all of them. We're going to start with a quiz tonight, and I really want you to participate. So raise your hand if you've ever been with a couple who uncomfortably argued over something little, like whether they went to Disney World in 2010 or 2011, and they just wouldn't let it go. Did you want to just scream, "It doesn't matter"?
Or raise your hand if you've heard anybody else say something like, well, you got to go to the hockey game on Saturday, so you need to watch the kids today so I can go shopping. Raise your hand if you have ever answered your spouse's tone in a way that they actually could fill in the blank at the end with the word idiot, like, honey, where are our scissors? They're in the junk drawer.
Idiot. If you raised your hand even one time, you can relate to having a lack of humility. But even if you didn't raise your hand, you might have a pride problem or at minimum, an honesty problem. In fact, we have to be honest and say that all those examples we gave were ours. Each week, we've heard some courageously real stories about different marriages. Most of these stories included pretty much a very traumatic experience or two. We haven't experienced some of the trauma that we've heard about over the past few weeks, but yet we think our marriage has been just as threatened because of our choices and actions in the area of humility. And although this isn't a singular big event, it is something that happens to our marriage every day. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that a lack of humility can destroy a marriage just like betrayal or financial irresponsibility. And although we can recover from traumas, humility is necessary to recover, for that recovery to happen. As Jenny and I have been focusing on this subject this week, we agreed that humility has impacted our marriage and matured us individually, both long-term and in the day-to-day, more than anything else. Every day we have to make choices to give humility or to withhold it. It's not always the most natural reaction for us. This is a true story describing a time when I did not deny myself or put my spouse's needs before my own. We had 4 young children at the time, and I'm sure we had at least 1 in diapers and probably a few that couldn't even put their shoes on yet. We were going somewhere, and Jenny was making food to take with us, and it was on the weekend, and I was watching a football game that I really wanted to see. She approached me and said, "Steve, we have to leave in 45 minutes. I'm still trying to cook, get the kids ready, and get myself ready. I don't know if we're going to have enough time to make it." I said, "Don't worry about me. I can take a shower and get myself ready in 10 minutes. I've got plenty of time." But wait, it gets worse. She cleared things up for me by telling me that she needed my help to get all the other people ready in the house. And I actually said this: "You have to do things like this all the time when I'm not here. Just act like it's a Tuesday and I'm not at home." I couldn't understand why it was so quiet in the car when we were on our way.
You actually, a few weeks ago, heard one of our daughters and son-in-law share their story in one of these re-engage sessions. Both of our daughters had expectations of their young husbands in early marriage that their husbands could not possibly meet. They expected their husbands to be like their 50, now 60-something-year-old dad with decades of marriage experience. Their husbands maybe sometimes acted like the example that Steve just shared. Well, we're going to say what we would say if you were our adult sons or daughters, and what we have to say to ourselves all the time is, please give your spouse and yourself just some time to grow and change. Because we found like God grows people over time. And if you bail too early, you never get to experience that. Steve really does show me humility a lot of time. And here's an example that came to my mind. I really wish I could say this happened when I was really young, way early in our marriage. But the truth is, it really didn't happen that many years ago. Steve loves to work outside in the yard. And one day I was trying to clean a spot off of the carpet that I thought he had tracked in. He walked in the room and I said in a crabby voice, like, I don't know what you have tracked in, but I can't get this spot off. Please go through the garage instead of coming in onto the carpet. Steve looked at the situation a minute and walked over to a knickknack that was sitting near a window where sunlight was just streaming in. He picked up the knickknack and the spot on the carpet magically disappeared. He did not say a negative word. He didn't laugh at me for trying to clean a shadow off the carpet. That is humility. If he had made fun of me or mocked me, or if he had gotten angry and defensive, which he kind of had the right to do, I would have been defensive. The situation could easily have really escalated. But because he was gentle with me and the way he responded to me, I actually could eventually laugh at myself. I know you did laugh later, but in the moment, he put on humility towards me. The fact is that I am a Christian, and humility is a fruit of the Spirit. It's already in me. I really have to think about this verse, 1 Peter 5:5. It says, all of you clothe yourselves with humility, put it on toward one another, put it on toward one another. For God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So humility's there, but I make the decision to put it on, like clothe myself in it, or to just put on my own way, doing things my way. If you are human and you're listening to this right now, you could be thinking, oh my gosh, she's just asking me to do more or try harder. And I don't want you to be overwhelmed by that, because as we said, humility is a fruit of the Spirit. All we really have to do is be willing to change and desirous to change, and then trust God that he will grow us. And as we try to put on the humility that he's actually already gifted to us.
And believe me, it's still a challenge, and we certainly didn't start out that way. Why would we focus on being humble with each other? Because we know a couple that have a 60-year-old marriage with very little joy and happiness. We can't stay married without practicing humility. We can't honor the covenant that we've made and stick it out in misery. But it's worth it for us to try to practice humility as protection against that. I really believe that when I show humility to Jenny, it brings joy and happiness to our marriage. Practicing humility is a predictor of having a fulfilled marriage. And these are some of the things that we want in our marriage, to be fulfilled and defined by joy and happiness.
I agree that you can stay in your marriage without humility, but pretty good chance that you're going to basically end up miserable. We took a vow till death do us part, and pretty quickly realized that if we weren't careful, our vow was going to be till our own pride pulled us apart, because that's really what was happening. We were getting torn apart, and ended up, the end result could be just living like roommates, or arguing all the time, or maybe even both. And it's for my joy. That's the opposite of what I really think, because I think that if I get my own way, then I will be happy. But that really hasn't proved to be true in our marriage. In my experience growing up, it was like when I was becoming a woman, the women's lib movement, if you want to call it that. And it impacted my home a lot. It wasn't just about equality. It was a loud and clear message for me as a woman to stand up for myself, to look out for myself. And my mom even said, make sure you have a plan B, because if your marriage doesn't make it, you need to make sure you have a way to support yourself. And in her defense, she had been married and had me, and then my biological dad was unfaithful, and her marriage, he wanted out, and she never expected that to happen. So I knew that she was just trying to protect me just from the painful things that she had gone through. And she ended up getting remarried when I was 3 years old, and I got adopted by that dad. But the messages that she gave me weren't all biblical. And so then after I decided to follow Christ, to follow Jesus and try to live biblically, I sort of had to start looking at things in a different way. Philippians 2:4 said that we're not merely to look out for our own personal interest, but also for the interest of others. And in my thinking, I thought, well, I can consider myself, but now that I'm married, it's not just about me anymore. And as we were trying to talk about this, Steve had a great example that helped me understand how I could still think properly about myself, but also include my spouse in thinking more of him. You want to go?
Yeah,
Okay.
so one thing that helps me view and embrace humility is not thinking of myself less, but thinking of Jenny more. And I like to picture a ladder where to help me remind me of this concept. So instead of me putting myself lower on the ladder and then putting her higher than me, she's still not very high. But if I have a right attitude about who I am in Christ, and put myself where I feel like I should be, and then put her on a higher rung, then that makes her even higher with our identity in Christ.
Yeah.
So Jenny mentioned the word practice. We have to continually practice this and continually ask God for help. When we started thinking about humility and how humility or the lack of it had impacted our marriage, we thought about our first fight that we had right after we got back from our honeymoon. The book mentions considering your spouse's long-term goals and transforming your dreams to kind of being more of in line with hers. And I remember that first fight. I had not begun the transformation in the area of how we spent money. So pre-marriage, I spent very little money. I lived with 4 guys in an apartment. I drove a beat-up car, and basically there wasn't anything I wanted or felt like I needed to buy. But right after we got married, Jenny and I had bought a small house in Baton Rouge, and it was an older home with some older Venetian blinds, kind of like they had in the schoolhouses back then, and it needed curtains throughout the house. Jenny did the research, shopped around, found some curtains that she really loved and that would work for our home. But when I saw the price tag, I had major sticker shock. I thought, curtains, how much could they cost? But it did seem, when I saw the price, it seemed very ridiculous that we would spend that much money on curtains. I thought, no way. She was very mad because she had spent a lot of time shopping around and thought that I was not respecting her opinion. She was angry, and I was angry. So what did I do? I went up on the roof, and I started cleaning out the gutters. I really think I was avoiding the issue, avoiding the conflict, but while I was up there, God allowed me to start to realize that in the area of finances, my agenda was not the only agenda to consider now that we were married. I wasn't single anymore, and it wasn't appropriate for me to continue to live the same way I did before I got married. Whether it was hanging out with my friends, playing video games all night, not cleaning up after myself, or considering how to handle finances. Embracing humility looks like changing my personal agenda to creating a new agenda that includes Jenny's dreams and goals as well as mine. This has not been a one-time event for me. I have to continuously learn and relearn this process throughout our whole marriage.
I do too. And I want to think back to that first fight because, it's never just about one person. We were having guests come over to our house later that day. And when Steve climbed up on the roof and started cleaning out the gutters, I was so mad. I felt like he was just telling me no, almost like a father would say no to their child. It didn't go very well internally for me. I felt like he just said, nope, no, I'm not going to do that on the curtains, and then just walked off to do what he needed to do. I never once considered that he might be thinking about what to do. I did not certainly believe the best in him. I didn't want to talk about it. I really wanted to yell and fight about it. I remember that I really wanted to get in my car and leave without telling him where I was going. I did not want to leave my marriage, but it's terrible, but I just wanted to leave him sweating, wondering if I would come back before our company came that we were hosting later that evening. If I'm really honest, I think I wanted to leave him having to explain to the company that I left. I wanted to hurt or embarrass him because I was hurt and angry and selfish and immature. I loved Steve enough, and there was enough something in there that I did not act on that. And I really wouldn't have left him just in the lurch, but the fact of the matter is I wanted to. It was my selfish desire for sure. I'm going to go ahead and tell you what happened with the curtains, because when I've told this before, everybody's like, well, did you get the curtains? Did you get the curtains? The end result was when we decided to compromise, and we got the curtains that I had selected for some of the main windows in our house, and then we waited on getting curtains for the rest of the windows. But that's really insignificant, because here's what I hope you see. I didn't consider my spouse's long-term goals. I didn't transform my dreams and goals to become more in line to match his. If we had known something about this at the time, I think it wouldn't have escalated like it did. I wasn't really interested in why he didn't want the curtains. I never even asked him. Instead of lashing out and being upset because I felt disrespected and disappointed, I could have asked you, how I could have made you feel better about the situation. We were both in agreement that we needed curtains. I could have been patient to just wait until we were both on the same page before I moved forward. But the bottom line is I wanted what I wanted, and I wanted it like right then. If I'm honest, this is kind of what I was led to believe, that when I got married, there were two people getting married, one who knows everything and a husband. And that's funny, but it really is kind of the message I got. And even, at the time in media, that was, we hear other women talking about it. That attitude, does nothing but set me up for disaster. I have the privilege of sharing my life with a partner that I picked and I loved. And that is just a glorious thing. But I wasn't really experiencing it much of the time because, I as a woman can treat my husband like my child. It's easy to do, or you can treat me like your employee. And once we made a decision at some point that we were just an intimate team of two people that were both flawed sinners, both needed grace, and just trying to do the best we could to love each other well. It wasn't until that point, like pretty much, years into our marriage, that we really could experience the oneness that we wanted to, that comes from having a spouse.
And there are things, big things that we all face in our marriages. It might be cancer, other health issues, or a child who is hurting or rebelling, financial difficulties, loss of a job, loss of trust. Yes, practicing humility towards each other will help in those crisis areas. But looking back over the years, most years have been just a series of day-to-day events. The day-to-day living will be important to whether or not your marriage thrives. And that's where humility comes in on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, practicing makes the day-to-day together so much more pleasant, not nitpicking and correcting everything, helping each other, serving and doing things that are like his job or her job. And all of this makes our life together much happier. But that's only part of what humility, why it's been important. Showing humility to each other, when we look back on the years of our marriage, we think it's actually changed who we are. Like it's actually changed us and kind of matured us individually.
Yes. I was painfully shy when we first met. I was fine with friends, but I just would not talk in groups, or I had a hard time expressing myself in front of new people. I think it was a fear of failure thing. After we would leave a group, Jenny and I would talk in the car, and I would share all the things that I really wanted to say. She would encourage me every time that what I had to say was valuable. And she lovingly challenged me that God wanted to use me, and she really challenged me to speak up more. Do you know what I do for my job now? I actually travel all over the country, well, during normal times, and then all of my job includes meeting with strangers and getting up in front of large groups and speaking. Do I say stupid things sometimes? Do I fail sometimes? Yes, but I am a more confident man because of her humility towards me. I'm not as fearful of failing. I still don't like it that much, but I'm not as afraid because someone humbly loved who I was even when I did fail. And I know God loves me like this, but our spouses have the power to demonstrate God's love in the flesh.
When we got married, I thought that I really knew myself, but being married revealed some things that I just hadn't noticed. I had really fun parents. I think, Steve, you're probably shocked when you first met him for the first time. My dad's only 20 years older than me. So when he met my parents, I was 20, my dad was 40. There were so many positive things and negative things about having really young, fun parents. And then really our environment was focused on entertainment and fun. One of the outcomes was, my parents really trusted me to figure out things by myself and thought that would really build my confidence to show that I could do it. And there wasn't a lot of supervision. Part of that, I think I probably didn't really feel super nurtured or super protected. And so I did protect myself. That's what I learned to do. It's not all bad, but I realized that when I was doing this, it really impacted our relationship after I got married and even impacted me spiritually. In our early marriage, when something would happen and I'd feel disappointed or anything like discouraged, I'd start thinking, I only have myself. Why did I once again think that I could depend on somebody else or that I even needed to depend on anybody else? I'll be okay if I just take care of me and don't count on anybody else to do that. I guess that, I can do this was kind of my mantra. I don't need anyone else. Those kinds of thoughts do not bring intimacy or connection into a marriage, and they really kill unity for sure. And I had a hard time depending on God. What we've said since our first time doing Reengage is that, we can't do this without God. I had a relationship with Jesus, but I certainly wasn't trusting him. I trusted basically my own abilities. It's not like the struggle ever ends for me, but when I'm tempted to self-protect now, I find myself just saying, okay, no, that's a lie. I cannot do this. You can, and try to just let God do it instead of taking care of it myself. So you showing me humility has really changed me too. And as we've grown over time, I think you've considered my needs and wants time and time again, even if they were in opposition to yours. And that's made me feel heard and understood and considered. And it makes me feel the love that I know that's there. And obviously my thoughts have changed because now I'm like, oh, I have Steve. He's on my team. He's got my back. And as we've lived through life and all the things that come with it, that's also helped me to have freedom and kind of a deeper understanding of God's love and acceptance for me too. Okay, so now that you've treated me that way, I think it's easier for me to humble myself in front of you. And there's a lot of freedom that comes with being able to say, while you were out of town, I sat and watched mindless TV all night. And now I kind of want you to feel sorry for me because I'm really behind on all the things that I need to do. Or, that leftover cake that was sitting on the counter? Every time I walked by the kitchen, I ate it one sliver at a time, and then I want to complain because I can't lose weight. Steve, I realized today that I was so judgmental towards someone, and actually I thought I was better than them. And now I think being honest about that is for my benefit. And when I practice it in marriage, it really helps me. And so I think it's helped me to learn how to be real and especially have joy in our marriage.
Yeah, so what does humility look like in action? What could it look like in your marriage? Humility serves and meets needs, gets coffee, gasses up the car, is kind in communication, asks questions, moves toward the other person physically or emotionally, says no to something that I want to do or to purchase, says yes to something that's important to Jenny. It picks up after myself. It asks for forgiveness.
And sometimes when we practice that, we don't get the response we want, and humility is not necessarily extended back. Maybe your spouse just isn't ready at the time, or maybe they're just in sin and not giving it up yet. So we still have a choice even then to be mad or show humility. But the truth is, if they don't change and you don't change your reaction and just keep responding from your hurt, then nothing begins to change in your marriage.
But what we have found is if one of us extends humility anyway, even if the other one is being selfish, that's when things can begin to change for the better. Raise your hand if you've desired to have an unhappy marriage. That's what I thought. We all desire to have a marriage that is fulfilling and joyful. And this week's lesson has laid out what we need to do to get that result. There's one last thing that's been very meaningful to us, and that's Philippians 2:13, that it is God who works in us. We learned the first week that we cannot love as we need to without God doing something in us and with us daily. And embracing humility, it's the same thing. I'm assuming that we're all here because in some way we want to grow and change as couples. Nothing changes if nothing changes. So we hope that you will discuss in your small groups how humility or lack of it has impacted your relationship. But even more so, we hope that you will practice the action of showing humility, of acting humbly towards each other, of being real with each other when you go home this week.
Mm-hmm. Just recently, I was going to ask Steve to help me with something that I knew he would not enjoy, and I knew it would disrupt his day. And so I said to him, Steve, I'm going to ask you to do something, and I want you to answer as boyfriend Steve, not husband Steve. He laughed, and he related immediately to what I was inferring. And we've kind of started using it a lot. For example, he might say, I need girlfriend Jenny for a minute to help me with something. It's kind of funny, but it's also a little bit sad. We still see that we have a lot of room to grow in humility because we really want to end up where we're living like girlfriend Jenny and boyfriend Steve even after 37 years of marriage, and it doesn't always happen. We still have a way to go.
Yeah, so we hope that one thing that you will become more aware of from our story is that your marriage can be harmed by big wounds, something that stabs you right in the heart, but it can also die from pricking your spouse's heart over and over again by a lack of humility. You could kill your marriage with a big stab in the heart or just prick it to death. A lack of humility is a threat. It wounds, and it's dangerous. We hope you will make changes because these changes will impact your marriage, both for the long term and in the day-to-day. It may sound counterintuitive, but we challenge you to try it. Let's close in prayer. Father, thank you for humbling yourself completely for our benefit and for your glory. Help us to humble ourselves for our spouses in the same way. We believe that it is for our benefit and you are glorified when we love as you have loved us. Open our hearts to each other as we discuss these with our groups tonight. Amen.
Amen.